Have you ever wondered how to apply for law school and maybe a little bit of what law school is like? This is Christina Williams with Just Criminal Law.
And David Mann, legal storytelling specialist. All right, so this is a subject that does matter to me quite a bit. I do teach in a law school in Chicago at Loyola, and my son really wants to be a lawyer. And he's in college right now, so this is a big topic. And I'm sure lots of people are wondering, if you're interested in becoming a lawyer, you have to go to law school. So I think our first question here is, how do you pick a law school? Which one do you go to?
Well, a big factor that you should take into consideration is what state do you want to practice law in? Because it's really important to establish those relationships with your fellow law students, because they are relationships that you will use throughout your law career. And so it's really, really helpful if you know other lawyers in the state that you're practicing, and the best way to do that is to go to school in that state that you plan on practicing.
Okay, so it sounds like it's, in your opinion, more important the location than sort of the rank of the school nationally or prestige or something like that?
Well, if you want to network with, higher level law firms, say law firms that are very large and they're in New York City or Los Angeles, then a lot of times going to the more prestigious law schools can be beneficial, because it's all about those relationships again. And, if your colleagues are also Yale graduates or Stanford graduates, and, that's important because you want to work in a big law firm, or you just want to be able to network maybe politically, then, those law schools that are more nationally recognized are definitely a good option.
Okay, does a person have to choose whether to go to a law school to focus on criminal versus civil law?
Well, the first year of law school for every law student is basically the same courses. So you get a mix of criminal law courses, and you get a mix of, say, business law or property, all of the other types of law. So you get a good overall broad picture of the different areas of law that you can practice. So no, there's not like a criminal division and a civil division. That first year you get a blend, and then the more you go for 3 years to law school, and then the second and third year you get to choose more of the areas you're interested in to take classes.
Yeah, that's the same as at Loyola where I teach. There's a lot of just being a lawyer involves these skills types of classes. So another thing I know that my son is concerned with, and that anybody wanting to apply to law school would be thinking about, is the LSAT test, the LSAT test. So how much does that factor into admission?
Sure, the LSAT is a test that you take prior to applying to law school, and the score is good for 5 years. But that LSAT score is really one of 3 different areas that law school admission take into consideration. So the LSAT score, like the median score right now in the nation is around 156. And so, you want to at least score the median, and then the higher you score, the more points you get, so to speak, in that portion of the admission test. So the LSAT is very important, and it's, a test that involves reading comprehension. There's a little writing section to it, and it involves, if I remember correctly, some reasoning or critical thinking skills. And so there was a portion of it that involved logic games that just this year they eliminated from it. So now it's really only a few sections instead of having 4 sections to look at. And that logical reasoning or that logic game portion was one that I struggled with on the LSAT. So when I learned that, I was, kind of applauding, because my son is also interested in going to law school, and I thought, well, if he doesn't have to do that, then that's all the better.
And I've heard strong advice to get tutoring before taking the LSAT, which can take many forms. You can have online tutoring, you can have in person. It depends how much money you want to spend on it. But does that sound like it's probably a good idea?
Well, I didn't do any sort of tutoring, but definitely, it just depends on the person and how they learn. And if they learn best through working with another individual, like a tutor, then definitely, that would have a lot of advantages. What I can say really helped me is just taking a lot of practice tests. The more you practice how to take a particular test, then you kind of figure out what the test purpose is, or, you kind of figure out what the questions and what the right answers will be, just because that's how your mind works. The more you practice, the more you see patterns, and the better you'll do.
Yeah, and you've been very, very successful with your law career, and I think that is a testament to, it's not all about like where you rank and when you graduate and all the things you hear about. It's really about drive and intention and knowing what you want. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. That is the biggest difference. There are lawyers that I know, that have been practicing the same amount of years that I've been practicing now, and they still don't really know what they want to do. But even during law school, I knew I wanted to own my own law practice. I wanted to be my own boss. I always wanted to be my own boss, but that didn't change in law school. And so when I got out, I hit the ground running, and I got a judicial clerkship. I worked for a judge, and I got to see a lot of attorneys practice in real life. And then I went straight to prosecuting, and I got a lot of courtroom experience. And then once I had that under my belt, I went straight over to criminal defense and started working in my own practice. And that's been 17 years ago, but I was on a path, and I just knew what I wanted to do. And that's really the key to being successful in any career, but especially law.
Okay, so regarding the admission process for law school, they look at the LSAT, but what else do they look at?
Well, there's really three areas that they look at. So the LSAT is one. The other is, how did you do in your undergraduate studies? They want a transcript. They want to see your GPA. And then they look at whether or not you took courses that would translate over into law school, like courses that involve a lot of reading and writing, and then courses that would require public speaking, and courses that require some critical thinking, like statistics and economics and philosophy. And they see how you did in those types of courses, because those are really foretelling on how you will do in law school. So they look at your undergraduate. And then they look at a third part, which really involves you writing a resume. And so what they're looking for on the resume is, during your time before applying, how were you as far as, did you have any jobs that maybe would give you a good foundation for law school? Did you belong to programs, or were you involved in athletics or anything competitive? So athletics or speech and debate, really, things that, again, prepare you for law school. And law school is competitive, and being a lawyer is competitive. So they're looking to see that you kind of gravitate towards those areas in your past that would help you in law school and help you be a lawyer. And then there's a couple of essays that you complete for them. One of them, talks about maybe why you want to be a lawyer. The other one, they give you a choice of, in Wyoming, why would you want to practice in Wyoming? Or what, special challenges have you faced before applying for law school? And so they give you some options on short essays, but you do have to write 2 of them. And I think, that covers most of what the application process is. Oh, and then 2 character letters. So, whether it's from an employer or a coach or a undergraduate professor, whatever the case may be, they want to see a couple character letters as well. And so that's the third category that weighs in on whether you'll get to law school or not.
Okay, so it's the LSAT and then your academic history, co-curricular history, and essays, and then also these recommendations. So it sounds like if you've got all that, you stand a pretty good chance of getting into a good law school.
Yes, and it should be noted that I didn't necessarily leave undergraduate with the intent of going to law school. And so, all I can say is during your undergraduate program, participate in as much as you can as far as being involved in what's going on on campus. Always try to strive to get really good grades. And then, be involved in things that improve you, just whether it's, sports or, like I said, speech and debate, and just set yourself up for whatever it may be. You may not get into law school, and regardless, really focusing on a well-rounded undergraduate program. I know it's a lot of fun as well at college, but you got to remember why you're there. So those are kind of the words of wisdom I have, I guess, David.
Well, that sounds great. How might someone get a hold of you to practice criminal defense for them?
Sure, we will include a link in the description where they can call, text, or chat with a member of my team anytime, day or night. Here at Just Criminal Law, we know you only get one shot at justice, so make yours count.